This does not have to be multi-surface. It's just what I had. Good morning. We'll be starting here in just a minute or two. Make sure you have all your supplies. Whatever you're painting on, your beverage of choice. Mine today is Highlander Grog, High Sierra, by Bears Brothers. It's a company out of Watertown, Wisconsin. It's my favorite coffee of all time. Maybe you're drinking a mimosa this morning or a Bloody Mary. Maybe you're watching in the afternoon and you're going to be having a glass of wine. You're going to want a pencil, variety of paintbrushes. Depending on the size of your canvas is going to determine the size of your paintbrushes. I'm using a 5x7, but I'm also going to be painting on that blue rock. I spray painted it yesterday, so I had a pretty blue surface to paint on. Some paper towels so you can wipe off your wet paint brushes. Some sort of palette. I like to just use styrofoam plates because they're easy to come by. What I really prefer to use is something recyclable, a lid to one of my old Folgers coffee containers, a lid to a cottage cheese container, any kind of plastic lid. Those are great. Ice cream tubs, those work good too. I have my 5x7 canvas. Like I said, a pencil. We got our paints, which you only need red, yellow, white, and black today. So we don't need the blue. If you want the blue, you can always use whatever color you want. Change it up. I'm going to show you two different ways to paint the butterfly. One on here is going to be very simple and basic. It's not the full butterfly. It's almost like you're zooming in and you're seeing two separate butterflies' wings just kind of overlapping. And on my blue rock here, I'm going to actually paint a full butterfly. So let's get started with the canvas. Grab your pencil real quick if you have it. You want to start about a quarter of the canvas at the bottom on the left hand side. So if you're to divide your canvas into fours, the bottom quarter here, you want to take it at an angle going up towards the center and then just curve it down and off the page. It can go off the right hand side or you can bring it all the way down to the right hand corner if you'd like. Don't worry about too much being precise. This is just going to help us show which direction we want our paint strokes to go for our background. The top half here, we're going to be painting our strokes in a diagonal going from the top left to the bottom right, the middle here. And this bottom section here, this wing, we're going to have them going in the opposite direction. So they're going to kind of be crisscrossing. All right, once you have that, remember if you have a canvas that's an actual canvas and not just a canvas board, you have sides. Make sure you're painting the sides along with. All right, unless you're going to frame it, it always looks more finished if the sides of your canvas are also painted. We are going to need our red, yellow, and black, and white eventually. We'll start just with the red and yellow. So I'm going to put a little dab there. You can put this directly on the canvas as well if you like, and I'll show you in a minute what we're going to be doing. So last week I painted the gray right on the canvas. I put the paint right on there and then spread that. So if you haven't watched the video for the owl, go ahead and watch that. I'm going to grab my, I don't know what size it is. I say that every week. It says 5/6, 5/8, 5/8 brush. Okay, so it's not quite, it's a little bit bigger than a 1/2 inch. I'm going to take that brush. It happens to be angled. It doesn't have to be an angled brush. It can be. I just like flat brushes better. I'm going to grab both the colors with my brush. Big old glob on there. And I'm going to start painting back and forth. and blending those colors, not completely orange. Leave some red and some yellow. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to reload. I want to make sure that I'm going to have enough paint on my canvas without having any white spaces show through. You notice it's going to take over and get that darker red and orange color quickly, so you might have to reload with more yellow and less red every time you do this. And if you overlap that pencil line, that is okay. Because we're going to be making those black anyway. Once you have that done, remember we're going from the top left corner down towards the top or the bottom right side. In the inside, this bottom section, we're going to go in the opposite direction. So I'm still going to grab those paints, still grabbing the yellow, a little bit of the red, and I'm going to paint in this direction. Now, a lot of different painters and people who aren't painters, you guys will see things a little bit differently. You might find a different way that you like doing this that works better for you as you paint more, and that's great. You got to find what works for you. I try to make these as simple as I can for anyone who wants to learn some basic techniques, moving your brush across a canvas, how to load your paintbrush, and going from there. Add a little bright streak of red in there randomly, see how that ends up turning out. It might end up being black, I don't know, but we're gonna put it in there anyway. Alright, now this guy has to dry. Now again, I'm painting on a 5x7, you might be painting on a 16x20. If you're painting on a 16x20, you're gonna take a couple hours to finish your painting, where I'm gonna finish mine in an hour or less. If you have a hair dryer and you want to use a hair dryer, you can use that to blow this dry. You can wait for it to dry, or you can use, preferably not one with paint, but an extra plate and fan that off. I'm going to move this to the side right now and work on my rock for those of you who are painting on rocks. Your rock does not have to have a base color on it, but I decided I wanted to paint a full butterfly as well as just the partial one. So I started this guy. I painted him blue with spray paint yesterday on all sides, and I just let him dry overnight. And then I went back out this morning and grabbed him, and I started placing where I want my butterfly to be. Okay, it's a full monarch. His outer wings are going to be out here, and then, you know, this will be his bottom. So to start with, I grabbed my 1/4 inch flat paintbrush and my white paint. I'm painting white first because I want to cover up that the blue, so my butterfly will be nice and bright. So basically, the butterfly's bottom wings kind of looks like a heart, an upside down heart. So that was my first step. As I went through here and I painted my upside down heart. Now if you can't paint upside down, turn your rock over, or whatever you're painting, and paint them right side up. You don't have to paint upside down. I mean, technically this is upside down. So I'm going to flip them back around. Now when the monarch's butterfly's wings are full open, this is the bottom section kind of the segment of his body. There's butterflies who have three segments. They have their head, they have their body, and then they have the tail. All right. So this section here is kind of where the body meets where the rest of the wings are. This kind of dot indicates the top of, or the start of his head. Okay. So I mean, his head won't be too much bigger than that because, you know, they don't have ginormous heads. They're small little creatures. And then out here, I'm indicating where the outside of his wings are going to be. All right. So his butterfly wings, if you were to look at a butterfly, and I'm trying to do this with my hand. I'm sorry if I think it's working. All right. I I indicate this little dot here, that's his head, and this little dot over here. Now his wings are kind of arched up and they come to the segment of his body. The distance, the spread across here is the same on this side as it is on this side. And there's this kind of a hidden triangle, basically, would be right through here. So when I look at things, I try to break them down in shapes. So this guy here, I'm going to take my paintbrush and I'm going to curve him up and bring him back down to meet over here. And this guy is going to do the same. He goes like this and then curves this way. Alright, if whatever paintbrush I'm using feels not good to you, feels too big, switch it. You don't have to do it the same way that I have. The top of his wings should line up about where the top of his head is going to be. This point out here should kind of line up where that heart or this body segment kind of is. So they go up slightly to where the top of his head is, but then they curve back down and they meet where that heart was, the bottom of his body. Okay. Then the outside line on both sides here, you're going to curve, and you might have a little bit of a swiggle or whatever, and it kind of goes like this, but then it curves back up this way. And then we'll fill this all in. So kind of imagine it as like a raindrop or a teardrop. You've got this shape right here. So I'll show that again on this side. You kind of got this shape that's kind of like a teardrop. I'll try to make it a little bit more teardroppy look right there. So basically, think of a butterfly as 2 teardrops and a heart. Now, I'm going to be doing the monarch just because I think they're really pretty. They're kind of Wisconsin's butterfly or whatever, I guess. I don't know. We see a lot of them up here with the milkweed. But if you want to paint a different butterfly, you know, the shape is the same for a lot of them. So you can still use this shape. You just need to change up the color. Now, sometimes I do some that are blue. I don't even know if they're real butterflies, but the blue is pretty. So, you know, hey, that's what I like to do. I like the contrast of the blue of the rock here that I'm going to be doing with the oranges and reds. Use a little bit of a wiggly, shaky hand here. Fill that in. Come back to this side and kind of wiggle it a little bit. There we go. Again, we're just kind of blocking it in to cover up the blue on the back so that the colors of the butterfly will be a lot more vibrant. Alright, try not to leave big chunky brush strokes. You'll probably notice as you start adding layers, you can see the brush strokes, you know, especially where they just kind of come off and make that line. Try to blend them in the best you can. We're going for a little bit of realism on this guy. We're going to see how many birds want to come down and eat them up when I put them in my garden. I'm going to have, I don't know if some of you saw, a woman had a wonderful idea that, you know, right now she couldn't go and get seeds for her garden, and she wanted to plant some flowers. She had plenty of rocks, so she painted the rocks and made this really pretty bright colored rock garden of flowers. If you haven't seen it yet, check out on my page, The Glass of Art and More, and you'll be able to pull that up and see it somewhere. Alright, it looks like my canvas is almost dry just by me working on this butterfly here on the rock. So if yours are almost dry too, we can switch over and work on that one again. So I'm going to put my rock to the side, grab my canvas. Alright, now this section up here is fairly dry. This section down here is still pretty wet. But we're going to go ahead and start adding in our black lines. Put a little black on my palette. grab all my extra paint off there. There we go. All right, now I'm going to grab a detail brush, something that's itty bitty, something that's teeny. I got black all over my fingers. Teeny weeny, itsy bitsy. We don't want to have a really big brush. The smaller the brush, the better, especially if you're heavy-handed. A lot of beginners, when they're first painting, they're trying to grab all that paint out of their brush, so they're pushing down hard to get that paint out. Remember, when you push down hard on your brush, your bristles fan out. And when your bristles fan out, you get a thicker and heavier line. If you don't want a thicker and heavier line, you want that fine line, then you're going to have a really light touch, barely touch the canvas. All right, dipping on in, globbing it on up. I'm going to start in the top left corner. And I'm just going to have a little fun. I'm just going to come across. I'm going to wiggle it a little bit. And bring it out and down and kind of wiggle it back. And bring it that way again. So, just kind of wiggle it. If you missed some areas and it didn't cover, you can go back over it. We're just kind of trying to make a continuous line to start. You can go back through and color it in. Alright. Then we're going to follow it and make it a little thicker. So this is going to go off the canvas, so I'm going to start over here. Remember where my pencil line was? I can still see it on my canvas because the paint didn't cover it up completely, and that's okay because, you know, that's why we have paint. We'll cover that up. And I'm going to fill this all in. Now that I have my detail line, if I want to switch to a thicker brush, I could. Bigger brush, I shouldn't say thicker. So if I was to grab a larger brush here, now I'm using rounds because that's what I had in my house here, but you could be using flats still here too. And I'm going to fill that all the way in. This whole side is going to be filled in with the black. So at this point, if you have regular stretched canvas, or if you have a piece of wood or something that's thick that doesn't already have a finished edge, you would want to paint this edge black as well. Now, I'm trying not to listen to the music too loud that I have on today. I've been getting flagged on Facebook apparently for Sony music being played without permission. So if you watch any of my videos and all of a sudden it goes quiet, it's because they muted a certain section that their song was playing in. So I'm just trying to turn it down so I can barely hear it in the background and still paint with you guys. Because I like listening to music while I paint. Okay, now that I'm using this bigger round brush, it happens to be a number 2, and I got the paint on there. If I want to continue with this one and make one broad stroke, I can, or I can go back to my smaller one. So again, whichever you're comfortable with. I'm going to kind of come off this tip, and I'm just kind of going to do a nice kind of squiggly, but not too squiggly line off the other side over here. If your canvas is still wet in areas like mine, just be careful not to stick your finger in it, otherwise, you know, you get orange or red or yellow paint on you. I have very light pressure down because if I was to put a lot of pressure right now with this paintbrush, being the number 2, my stroke would be really wide. Now, if you have a larger canvas, 11 by 14, an 8 by 10 even, if you press down a little harder, you're going to have a thicker line, and that's okay. The smaller the canvas, the smaller the line, so then I have to press down a little bit lighter. Also remember, there's a lot of paint in here. If you need to get that to a point again, twist as you're pulling, and see it brings that to a tip again, and then you'll have a nice fine point. I'm going to add some more paint. I'm going to come over here in a segment, and I'm just going to kind of come down around again. This guy can go all the way down and off as well. And I'm gonna add a little bit of a curve down here on the bottom right side, so it looks like one of the segments has ended just as it was about to go off canvas. I'm gonna come back through here, add a little bit more paint. Remember, I go in and I re-dip and I add more paint to my brush so I can keep my line finer rather than pushing it down and trying to force the paint out. It's better to go back and re-dip often than it is to try to force the paint out of your brush. Okay. Make this guy a little bit thicker up through here. Hope everyone had a chance to get out and enjoy the beautiful weather yesterday. I did. My husband and I went for 2 walks. We took our son with one. He went up to the park to catch some Pokemon on his phone. My daughter stayed in the house most of the day. She cleaned her room, which was wonderful. That doesn't happen often. Looks like a hurricane hit her half the time in there. Alright. I'm going to draw another segment over here, coming off of this area, and I'm going to connect it to that other line. Okay, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to draw this one like it's going to get hidden behind this other guy. I'm going to draw a line segment that comes down here. So you're kind of making a big rectangle there. Alright. One final segment on this side over here. It's going to meet this other wing. Now today is supposed to be just as nice, if not even nicer. I think it's supposed to be warmer today than it was yesterday. So get outside, get some fresh air, exercise, walk around your yard, mow your yard, pull some weeds, plant some flowers, do whatever you can. Get out and get some fresh air. Alright, now above this long line that we had over here, we're going to do some more segmenting up through here. So I'm just going to have a skinny guy right there, but I'm going to pull him away a little bit, and then I'm going to bring him back down and around, and he's going to connect to him over here. I was able to mow the yard yesterday. It rained 2 days ago, and then the day before yesterday was so incredibly windy that everything pretty much dried out, which was kind of nice. Our lake front is really high, like really, really high. So I can't mow, I don't know, probably about 8 feet to the water line because it's so soggy and wet. So I'm sure I'll have an interesting shoreline here pretty soon. Alright, so I'm going to come down a little bit. I don't want this to look like it's continuing. I'm going to just break it down just slightly and bring this guy over this way. Short line. He's stopping. Now, do a little box segment there. And bring this guy down. Alright, there's a little curve up through here. This guy does not connect straight. I'm going to bring him up this way. There we go. And then bring this down here again. Now, you don't have to make the butterfly exactly like mine, because every butterfly is a little bit different. I imagine they're kind of like fingerprints, their wings. Probably like a fingerprint. Just a little bit different. So there you go. There's your top wing. It's already finished. We're going to start on the bottom. Obviously, we have to put the white dots in here still, but that's that one. So now I'm going to follow my line, my pencil line, so that I make sure that gets covered up. And bring that around. I need a little bit more black paint, I think. Bring that down. Paint this edge black. So, I add a little bit more black to my palette over here. You could always add a little water too, just a little. You don't want a runny watercolor type thing. It's just to get your brush a little wet if you want to help keep your paint from drying out. It's not to make it runny or liquidy. Stick this guy over here so I don't have him dry out. You notice it didn't get runny. See, it's not running anywhere. But it's going to help it be a little bit more fluid. Alright. And remember, the reason why we don't add a lot of water to acrylic paints is it will tend to make it crack in the long run. It might take quite a while before it starts cracking, but it can start cracking if you add too much water. Breaks down the compounds of the acrylic, so you know, whatever science term you want to throw in there. Alright. Now, this part of his wing is like this part over here, okay? So we're going to have a little squiggly lines going on. We're just going to kind of go, ooh, kind of crazy. Get it over here and connect it over here. So, squiggly, squiggly, squiggly. And then fill that in. Once again, in case you want to share this with your friends, feel free to do that once it's uploaded. You can find this video and others in my video section. Any Facebook page, a business page, we've got a video sections, we've got a services section, there's photos, there's a lot of different things that you can look at. Like if you don't want to scroll through, you know, post after post after post and you're looking for something specific, try to find those areas that you can look up the events, you can look up the videos, you can look up the photos, like I said, services. If we are selling things, there's another term for that, like your store or something like that, it says. So if there's anything you're looking at, you can go that way. Plus, you can always reach out and send me a instant message or private message or whatever, and hey, where is that video again? I'll just go quick grab it, copy the link, and send it to you. I might not get to you right away. I've got to stay true to my school hours and make sure that I'm available for my students for certain hours and answer all their questions via email, but I'll get to you. Okay. Going back to my brushes again, I could go with the skinny one if I didn't feel comfortable with the thick one, or I can go with the bigger one if I'm okay with that. I've been okay with the bigger one, so I'm going to stick around with the bigger one. It's just easier to fill in a little bit faster. Alright. Grab a little bit of water again. Just make sure my pile here doesn't get too dry. Alright, filling up my paintbrush, bringing it back to a tip, and then grabbing a gob like so. All right, we're gonna have a segment over here. It kind of comes down like so. So just above the corner. If you go to the corner, that's okay. But just above the corner on the left-hand side, just a nice little curvy area there. Then we're gonna take this from this line and we're gonna also take it up and curve it this way. Not as big of a curve, just a slight curve. And we'll fill this section in. Like so. All right, now we're gonna do our bigger lines. Let's start with the ones that are gonna go across the page. We've got one starting here. Let's cover up some of this white area that I obviously missed with my base. All right, this one's gonna come up and then it's gonna start curving upwards and then it's gonna curve back over this way and go up. It's kind of like if I was to turn my page a really tall, skinny S. So if I was to turn it this way, you see that? You see that S shape? The S shape. All right. Bring that around. And we're gonna come right through here. And we're gonna segment that off up to here. All right, like so. Cleaning up the lines a little bit, adding a little more paint to get all nice and covered. And there's that guy. All right, so if you didn't want to do it this way, and I'll show you another way of doing it on the rock. Once we have this colored, you could do the black first, let it dry, and then you could go and paint in each individual segment if you wanted to, and like do your own little mixing and matching of colors. Or if you have a segment that you don't like and you want to redo that, you can always do that. But wait until the black dries. We don't want to have a lot of crazy black marks. I'm going to come down here and make this a little bit thicker and bring it up. And I'm going to bring this guy all the way over. And remember, it's not a straight line, so let your hand be a little shaky. Let it be a little wiggly, a little ups and downs. Just don't go crazy with it, but, you know, if you do, oh well. Right? It's your butterfly section. It can be whatever you want it to be. Yesterday morning, before we got outside, I was flipping through the TV, and we ran across Bob Ross on PBS. His old episodes are still shown, still aired. And he had a little segment where he had a squirrel on his shoulder, and he was showing us his little squirrel. And then a little bit later, I was scrolling through Facebook, and I saw one of my friends posted a picture up in Reeseville of them enjoying a campfire, and her son having a little squirrel on his lap, eating away. If you Google things, it tells you do not feed the squirrels. They are wild creatures, but you know, it's always fun to have fun with things. So okay, so where this line kind of curve, that S curve, that top part of the S, we're gonna bring the lines swooping down slightly and then swooping back up and connecting it to this guy over here. So up, down, up. It's just kind of a reverse S. Alright, let's segmented that guy off. Alright. You have two more little segments. This guy's going to come up here. Notice some of you might be noticing this, some of you might not, especially if you don't look up a lot while you're painting. When I get to the other black part, I kind of round off those corners. I don't want to leave them sharp, so I kind of round them off a little bit. That's going to help make it look a little bit more like the actual monarchs do. They don't have sharp corners. They're very rounded. I'm looking at an actual picture here of a monarch as I'm painting. So, all right, and then we're going to do one more segment here. kind of right in the middle, and come up. I'm going to twist my paintbrush as I'm bringing it this time because it's going to help me get the rest of that paint out. And keep it to the point and keep it a nice, somewhat fine line. I don't want to flare it out too much. Alright, I'm going to get crazy and do that kind of a swoopy swoop on this one. Remember, sound effects, they help. Don't forget that. Make your quirky little noises and your sound effects as you're painting. Alright, so that's it. We'll be putting the white sections in, but we have to make sure the black is dry. So I'm going to switch over to my other rock here, my other canvas. You guys can finish painting this guy, or if you're done, just go ahead and dry it somehow. Switching back to this guy, I'm going to give him another coat, if I can here, of the white. Trying to brush out my paint strokes or brush strokes there. Just make sure that it's covered pretty good. Don't have to be perfect. There's a segment of his body. There's his head. I'll probably add his antennae with an extra fine tip Sharpie marker. It's gonna be a little too hard to get those antennae right if you're not using something that's smaller. So if you have a paint marker that's an extra fine point, go ahead and use it. I find all paint markers are like a regular fat Sharpie. But if you have the ones that are almost like a pen head, use one of those. Alright, so this guy, it's good. His body's going to come down to here. A lot of times when we're kids, we're drawing the bodies, we think the tails come out beneath the bottom two wings, and my image that I'm looking at here, it does not. It stops kind of right as the wings connect here. All right, so for this guy, like I said, I'm not going to do the whole background like I did the other one. I'm actually just going to start working on some of the black areas, let that dry, and then go back through and add my yellow-red mixture as I go. All right, so we need a tinier paintbrush because it's a smaller canvas. All right, I'm going to grab some of my black paint. Make sure my paintbrush has got a lot of paint in there, but I don't want to be all globby, so then I'm going to kind of press it down and get it off. But it's, you notice my paintbrush is it filled. It doesn't have the brush color there anymore. And then I'm going to grab some more of the paint. I'm going to start down here because this is dry. These might not be. Alright. So, I'm going to trace around my heart. Now, if it's a little wiggly, that's okay, because they do have kind of a wiggly, you know, so if your kids are coming up to you, giving you a big hug this morning, and they bump you, don't yell at them. It's okay. It's okay. You can always fix it. Alright, that inside line is a little bit more wiggly. I think I'm running out of paint again. I'm trying to find it on my canvas, so there's some on my palette, and I'm just not finding it. Alright, more paint. I'd rather add more paint to my palette than have too much and waste it. So I always try to start with a small amount. I usually end up having too much, like with the red and yellow, and have to throw it away anyway, but I try not to. There we go. And then this guy over here coming down. A little bit wiggly. And the inside is a little bit wigglier. Now, whenever I'm painting off of an actual photograph, I still take artistic license. I'm not trying to do realism. If I wanted to do the image that I'm looking at exactly, I would use what is called a grid process. I would take the image, I would lay a grid over top of it, so a bunch of squares. And then I would put a grid over top of this. It's the same size or bigger or smaller depending on, you know, if I wanted to make the image bigger or smaller. And then I would redo it so that everything lined up just perfectly. So I had all the segments right, all the little polka dots right, all the everything on this butterfly just as it is in the image. Birds don't care, so so I don't care, I guess. Okay, this is a little too wiggly for me. There we go. Alright, this guy is dry now. At least the outside is here. I'll paint him. Once your black is dry on your canvas, if you're ready to do some of the dots, we'll do that in just a minute here. And we'll stop doing this guy and I'll go back to that one. So that if you're done, then you can log off and tweak it if you want. Remember, we always sign our paintings. I usually use the bottom right side when I sign. Bob Ross usually does the bottom left side. I was noticing that yesterday because he actually signed one of his paintings. And whenever he signs, he usually signs over here with Ross. I usually sign over here with J. Person. Alright, so this guy here is outlined. This guy is kind of wiggly, 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 wiggly. Alright. Now, a lot of segments through here. This is kind of be... That's all going to be filled in with black and white, and this side will be the same. It will be a large section. His orange is just through here. Okay, I'm going to set him aside and go back to my other canvas. I'm going to clean out. See this touching it here? Yep, nice and dry. This outside is nice and dry. These inside segments might not be dry yet. If this should be, because you did it first. These down here, don't worry about it because we're not doing anything down here. We're just going to be on this outside part of his wing. So, now, remember, what's the easiest way to make little dots and circles? Use the back of your paintbrush. So in some areas, we're going to have those tiny little dots. So I'm just going to dip my paintbrush into my paint. And I'm just going to kind of put a few dots, and I'm going to let them change in size and how close they are together. I'll re-dip and then kind of let them go off again. Alright, I'm going to put another little guy over here. Alright, cleaning off the back of my paintbrush so I don't get it in my hand later. I'm going to go into a little bit bigger dots. I'm grabbing my smaller detail brush here. Try to. I have a lot of them. Get that glob off. Bring them to a point. Alright. Now, we kind of want to follow whatever line is in the black. Alright, so I'm going to go right here. I'm going to like pretend this line continues up. And I'm going to follow this curve here. Up to there, and I'm going to segment that off. I'm making small blobby, not polka dots, just kind of shapes. Alright, you might have to go over with a second coat. Our white paint does cover a lot. It is, like I said, it's titanium based. It's got the heaviest mineral there is in the paints world. So it usually is pretty good at covering stuff up. But because we are going over black, you might have to do a second coat. Or even a third. Oh, my coffee's getting cold. Not drinking fast enough. Vary the sizes and try to leave pretty even spacing around each one that you're doing. Now, if you watched my Doodle Days video that I had on there, and we were just doing some line designs and just, you know, some people call them Zentangles, some people just call it doodling, you know, whatever term you're using. You work on even spacing between your lines, and that's kind of what we're doing here. So I'm following the shape of some of these lines that this is making, and I'm finishing it off. So they're not really squares, they're kind of trapezoids, they're kind of their own thing. Now, as you get into this wider area here, you're not going to want to make one ginormous section. When we do our other butterfly and we're seeing a little bit more of the black and the white, those are going to be some longer segments, you know, kind of like this part of it. Not that big, but, you know. So right now we're just going to kind of break these up into smaller little segments. Think of like a mosaic. If you've ever done the rocks or tile broken up and you kind of glued them together and then put some mortar around them to make a tile. Kind of think that. So we're breaking them up, following our lines. So painting, following those lines, making more of a square shape and less of a triangle shape, but some of them will end up looking a little bit more triangulish, three-sided, and that's okay, because there's no two that are alike. Yeah, making little segments. Trying to vary the size a little bit. We don't want them all to look the same. And then down, right around, and off the canvas. It's kind of a very similar pattern that we're making here that you would on a giraffe. I know I had some people do giraffes with me in the past. Painting is very similar, the pattern. Kind of leaving the spacing around it. If you have an area that's tinier, your paintbrush is too big, don't be afraid to switch to a different size paintbrush. Maybe you want to include some of these dots into one of your blobs and get rid of the dot. That's okay, you can do that too. You're a little too close to something, change it up, call it a happy accident. And then, if those aren't dry enough to paint a second coat on yet, we're going to go ahead and work on this little section right through here, and then this section over here. Alright. Now if you wanted to add a couple more through here, if your line is thick like mine, you can add some more. If you don't, you can leave it black. If it's thinner, you can leave it that way. If you want to make it thinner and you have to go back over it with the yellow and the orange, you can do that as well. I'm going to turn my canvas here so that I don't put my hand through what I just had. That's the only reason I'm turning it. You don't have to turn it. If I would have been smart, I would have started up in this corner to start with, you know. So the same thing over here, you're making those blobby shapes, leaving the spacing in between. Kind of follow the curve of the black line and the last blob you put. Make some big, make some little, make some go off the edge of the canvas. You can put some dots on there if you want to. If you don't want them to all be these big segments, you can do some smaller dots again, just like we did over here. If you decide you don't like the dots, you can always paint over it. If you decide you don't like the segments, you can always paint over those. It's your piece. If you decide you don't like something, change it. Can't wait to see all your smiling faces and laughing and sharing that we always do with these. Everyone kind of looks around, oh my goodness, this one's so good, and this one's so good, and oh, yours is awesome. And I love hearing that. I like when people look at everybody else's and it's just like, wow. You know, and realizing that there's so many talented people out there in the world. We all have our strengths, we all have our weaknesses, and there's no need to compare, but let's be kind and just try praising each other rather than always criticizing and saying, oh well, you didn't do that right, she showed it like this. I've had couples like that a few times. So the one spouse is, oh, you're not doing it right, and the other one's, you just having fun. Like, it's okay, it really, it's fine, it's his painting or it's her painting. They can, well, but it's not gonna look the same. It's okay. Why do they all have to look the same? All right. And come back through and kind of go over some of my blacker areas. Another layer of my white paint. Now, real quickly, because some of these are still wet to do, I'm going to show you if you had an area that you wanted to cover. Now, again, you're not going to be able to cover it with the red and yellow paint over the black. So if you did have an area that you wanted to fix, you had a big boo-boo or something, let's say you sneezed and you smashed your paintbrush down with black in the middle of one of these guys, come back through with it, paint a little bit of white over it. Alright, so you're painting white over it. Trying to blow it. All right, so you'd paint white over it. And then you would fan it down, make sure it's nice and dry, or wait. Make sure it's nice and dry. And then you can come back in with your red and yellow. Now, if you wanted to make these segments look like they're a little bit darker on the outside, you'd probably start with your red. I always like the wet on wet technique, so I keep my paint wet as I'm going to be grabbing the next color and painting next to it, not letting it dry. When we're working over paint, we don't want the black, you know, and the red to mix or whatever. Then that has to dry. But the red is, I'm going to be adding yellow here to get to that orange. I want to still be wet so that I can mix those two things together. So that's how you would do that. If you had to fix something, you can just do that. If you think there's one area that's just too plain in color, maybe you want to lighten it up. Let's say we want to lighten this guy up here. Now, there's no boo-boos, there's no mistakes. We didn't worry about having a black to cover up, so I can kind of go right into my yellow if I wanted to lighten this guy up, and just holding onto my canvas so it doesn't go all over the place. I can go ahead and paint the yellow over top. Now you notice if I go over the black like a little bit, I did there, once I move my hand you'll be able to see it. You'll notice that the black shines through the yellow. That's why we have to cover it up with the white first. So you can lighten up an area there. So I can take my red and bring them on this side. I still have my yellow on my paintbrush. And you can blend it together that way. So if you have a section you don't like that you want to lighten up, you can do it that way. Think about the segments. When I'm painting the butterflies close to the black line, I typically stay with it a little bit darker. So that's when I would take my red and I would kind of trace along a section, then go into my yellow and start blending it so it looks like it's getting a little bit darker towards the black segments. It doesn't have to, it's just what I prefer to do. So there you have it, ladies and gents. In this case, I would probably sign like Bob Ross does over here, rather than bringing it this far over. And I'd probably just use my black Sharpie marker because it's easy to write with. This guy would need a couple more coats of white in some of these areas, but I'm not going to worry about that now. So if you did this and you're finished, you're all done, you can log off. And once I'm done recording my butterfly on the rock, I will post this for all of you to see and share and do it another time. So hope you enjoyed painting that butterfly. We'll go back to my rock over here and we'll paint this butterfly. Alright, back to my tiny airbrushes, little detail brushes, and my black paint. I lost my picture, my screen went black, so give me a second here because I wasn't typing. Alright, back to this guy. Dipping my tiny little detail brush. It happens to be a 0 this time. They're not always. Sometimes I have 0 over 3 or a 0 over 5. Those are really tiny ones. I'm going to load my paintbrush up with paint again. Twist it on my palette to bring it back to a tip. I've got some tiny little details on here, so I need that pointy area. Alright, this guy, I'm going to finish bringing his line and connecting it with that. Alright, this kind of first segment. It's kind of a bigger segment. Bring him up and off to the side. So again, kind of that teardroppy shape, a long teardroppy shape. Now, because this rock is going to be outside, after I'm done with my acrylic paints and I've got them dried, give it a couple days to dry completely before you spray something over it. I use a clear gloss Rust-Oleum Paints Touch It'll bond to pretty much everything. So that's what I'm going to spray over top of it. Now this is a glossy. You can get a matte or you can get satin. You can get whatever. So if you want the shine and the shimmer, go with gloss. If you want it to be more dull and less shiny, then get a matte. People always ask me what I put on my stuff, outside stuff. So like if you're working on a wood project and you painted like the scarecrow, reversible scarecrow snowman, I'll use something like that, usually sprayed over top of it. Put a couple coats, and then each year put an extra coat before you put it away or before you bring it out, whichever way you want to do it, and that way it's protected for the whole season. You won't have to repaint or restain as much. Turn that alarm off. All right. Now this guy has a little segment coming up this way. It's gonna actually be orange in there. This segment comes down. He actually just has 3 segments, but I'm gonna give him a 4th because the spacing looks kind of weird. Alright. More paint in my paintbrush. Alright, so I'm going to just go over those lines lightly. Don't put a lot of pressure, so that's why I have to kind of re-dip. That's why it's not giving me a nice dark solid line. So I don't want it to be too heavy. There is another little segment right here. Another little vein. Got a little bit of water here. Thin that out slightly. I'll make it move on my rock a little easier. Now, if you had a bunch of different color Sharpie markers, you could use Sharpie markers on a rock. Kind of sort of works. Paintbrush is opening up here. Let's get it back to a tip. All right. And this guy, we'll find a little line up through here, bring him around. This one kind of matches. Let's bring them out. Fun thing with paint, you know, I could be doing this with a pencil and kind of drawing it on first. Or we can continue doing it with paint and working that way. So it's going to come through here. Come down. This way, just like the other side. They kind of mirror. They're almost identical on both sides, looking at the butterfly. Some butterflies have big round circles here, and they kind of look like eyeballs. That's to scare, and moths. That's to scare the birds away from eating it, thinking it's a big, scary something staring at them. So they won't get that. It's our defense mechanism. Monarchs, I think, are poisonous. Or there's another, no, I think there's another one. I don't know. Something mimics certain butterflies. Anyone a butterfly expert out there, maybe you can answer that question. It looks very similar to it. And the birds get them confused often and end up eating a poisonous one, so they try to avoid all of them. I don't know how they get that smart. It's like squirrels. How do they know not to stand on the telephone pole and touch the wire at the same time? Did they watch someone else do it first and said, nope, not gonna do it? And then who was daring enough to say, gee, I wonder if we jump across the wire we won't get electrocuted? I think of weird things like that. Or is it just me? I'm just weird, I suppose. All right, let's see. We got this segment here. It's coming here. It's going this way. Going down. That's what it should look like on the other side. And then this little segment here, this is a little bit darker, this is a little bit darker. And we have this little section that's left. It's going to be orange as well. We'll fill in that area, we'll fill in this area. Now, we got a lot of areas over here that are pretty black, so I think I'm just going to fill some of this in. And we'll have to leave some of these other segments white. There's some white areas through here. There's a spot there that I missed. Yeah, we'll do another segment here. Trying to get to that fine tip point again. So this kind of comes around here as well, those white segments. It comes down about here. These little guys are going to be white. Bring that to a point again. These tiny little details, it takes a little bit more patience and a little bit of going back and forth a lot more with that paint brush. Alright, this will be black. There'll be a couple other little dots around here on this side. But I'll paint those on top. It'll be easier. Just like down through here, there's going to be a lot of those little dots, but it'll be easier to paint them on top and leave than it will be trying to paint around them. So another larger one here. Side over here. Try to get my brain to work in the right direction here. Okay. Sometimes when I'm focused on doing everything this way, I have to stop for a second and rethink how the lines are going in the other direction. So we get this large segments. Do the best you can to mimic what it is on both sides, but if it's not exactly the same, it's okay. It's going to look more correct maybe to you, at least to me, if it's because of the picture I'm looking at. But it's not like I'm going to have this sitting next to an actual butterfly. A butterfly might land on it, might think it's a mate or something, I don't know, or a friend. I've had that happen before. Alright, so I've got those major segments on the top. We're going to do the segments down here on the bottom. His body, kind of paint that in black now too. We'll have some little white spots that come up on it later. So let's do the body start first. His head is kind of a diamond shape, like a fat square on the side because his eyeballs, I'm guessing, sticking out there on the side. His back comes up through there. Kind of comes down to a skinnier diamond shape. So bring that down. Need to rinse out my paintbrush and get a finer, smaller one here. That's better. Alright. Alright, so his body comes to about here. Think of a pentagon type shape, not the soccer ball type pentagon, but a birdhouse type pentagon. That's his body. And then his bottom half, or we'll call it his tail here, the other segment, kind of flares out a little bit and comes back around. Not crazy. It's probably too much. What I have here is a little too fat, but we can fix it later. Now his body isn't black, believe it or not. It's kind of a orangey or brown color. Blends in with his wings a little bit, but there are segments that go in this direction like a worm. So if you wanted to paint a couple in just lightly, don't worry if they're not completely covered. We're going to paint the orange over top of that, and some of that black might actually show through if we don't go too dark with it. I'm going to grab some more black. Sometimes I just like to open my lids and just dip a little bit into that. It's easier and waste less paint for me to do that way. Okay, so I'm going to draw this segment all the way up. Remember, continue that line and then go back through and add the extra paint if you need to. Very, very light pressure. This is a really tiny surface. Segment there. Another guy that segments up. This is going to be coming off here. One more segment through here. Redip. Bring this guy up this way. This is going to curve up and then go all the way this way. Kind of talking to myself more than you guys right now. I apologize. This guy comes down this way and up along the outside of his body. Alright, so that's what that wing looks like. Let's see if I can mimic that on the other side over here. Maybe take my paintbrush, twist it to that nice fine point. There's still paint in there, but it's not globbing up. As I keep redipping, it gets globby and then it gets yucky, and yeah, makes it a little bit more difficult to control a fine line. Alright, so trying to mimic this guy over here again. So this is coming. Let's see, this guy comes like this and like this. And then he goes up to there. This is filled in. The next big line is, this one is there, this one is there, so that is my big line. So this guy is going to come down. Let's start going in that direction. So this guy needs to look like that guy. And down and up. segments into that. And then let's get these guys segmented off. This one, two, three. Alright, this kind of has to go up this way, so we're going to fill that in a little bit. We're going to fill this guy in over here some more too. Oops. I have to come back through with some white and kind of go over that again, but we'll see. Yes. If you want to add another segment in, go ahead. If your area is a little too big, a little too small, a little too whatever, either add or subtract. This one needs another one. Close enough for horseshoes and hand grenades, right? Alright, so going into my red. I'm going to start outlining the inside where the white is. And coloring in that whole section there. I have a fan above my head, so sometimes it dries it out a little faster than what I had planned, but that's okay. I dip into a little yellow. The red is still on my paintbrush. And that's how I get my orange and my red on my butterfly. We'll mimic him over here the same way. So bring that red. Fill that segment in. Back into the yellow. The red paint is still wet. Nice long strokes to fill up the whole little segment. So go in the direction that the segment is in. Okay. Fill in this little red guy over here. A little bit of yellow. Might go back in and lighten him up later. You did all that hard work lining your guy up here first, so try to keep the paint in the inside the lines. Remember being told that in kindergarten, paint color inside your lines. Try to do the same thing here while you're painting. It's typically why I like to do the outside first, and I do the black lines last. Black outlining will just kind of mask and cover up any of the little mistakes or boo-boos that you made. A lot easier than trying to cover the light over top of the dark. Now as the butterfly wings down to the bottom here, these get a little bit lighter orange than the top wings. Those are a little bit more red orange. These, as he gets closer into his body, they get a little bit more of a yellow orange. Now if you want to lighten it up a little bit more, you can always add white to your colors. It'll make it look a little bit more pale, not as bright and vibrant, but you can always do that. When you're finished painting, please feel free to share a picture of your masterpiece when you're done with others. Feel free to go outside and grab a rock and try making another one. Try painting this one along with me. You don't have to have canvases to paint. There's a lot of different fun options we have. You can paint on wood, you can paint on glass, you can paint on canvas, you can paint on rocks, you can paint on metal. You just have to know how to prep your surface. If you're using wood, sand it down really well, wipe it down with a damp cloth, you know, make sure you're getting all that dust off of there. And then, you know, you're ready to paint. If you're going to be painting on glass, you have to use enamels. Acrylics will not last on glass, so if you're going to do that, try not to use the acrylics, get the enamels, or the multi-surface. This guy here is multi-surface. I can cover him back up. You notice the lid is showing a pale, a birdhouse, and a glass. That's to let you know that you can paint on metal, wood, or glass there. Notice I don't clean my brush off often when I'm doing this type of a thing, because I like the marbling, I like the different colors that just kind of come off of my brush as I'm painting, so I don't have to go through and do too much detail work, but it makes it look really nice when it's finished. Alright, almost always starting with the red, doing my outline, trying to get right up next to the black. We don't want to have any white showing through. And then go back in with my yellow. Notice here I'm kind of pushing down a little harder, getting that paint out of my paintbrush because I'm in a larger area. And I have a really tiny brush. This one is a 3/0. And geese outside are noisy. I think there's a threesome out there, but one is not okay with being a threesome. It's kind of weird. There's a lot of couples of geese out here, and pairs, and there's one set that has 4 little goslings, and they're just yellow and adorable and whatever. But yeah, there's definitely a lone ranger out there, and he's trying to, or she, be a part of a family. And they don't want anything to do with him, or one of them doesn't want anything to do with him. So he just wants to be adopted. That's what I'm thinking. He just wants to be adopted into the family. He doesn't want to be alone. Not many people like being alone. you're an introvert, you like being alone for a while, but you still like people. You still like to socialize. I love doing these paintings from my house now because I am kind of an introvert, which is weird because I'm a teacher, right? But I need to be by myself sometimes to recharge, and this time has given me that. I am ready to get back out and do what I love doing again, but I have a lot of friends who are extroverts, and this time has been very difficult on them. So I'm hoping that they can use this, time to get in touch and feel like they're connecting with us and feel like they're part of a group here. Okay, remember these bottom wings, the underneath part, they are more yellow orange than they are red orange, so I'm kind of starting more with the yellow on my brush than I am adding the red. Now, if I do happen to go over the black line a little bit, I'm not, it's not the end of the world. I'm not going to cry about it or anything. If I really want to, I can try to paint over it with a paintbrush again after I'm all done, or I can take a Sharpie marker, because I have a lot of those, and paint with that instead. Not really paint, but fill in those black lines again, kind of outline it. That way I have a little bit more control because the marker doesn't flare out like the brush does, and I can have a nice fine line. Now, if you're going to be using something like tile to paint on, I have a lot of ceramic and porcelain tiles or whatever in my garage. I had a flooring company go out of business and ask if I would like them, so I went over and grabbed a whole bunch of them. You have to prepare the tile by sanding it off first. So sand it down, make it a rough surface, and then put a good coat of gesso or like a really thick, heavy white house paint with a little bit of plaster of Paris in it. If you don't have that, you can use a little bit of like a Mod Podge mixed in with some kind of a glue mixed in with your paint.
You let the door
and that'll
open.
help.
You're gonna leave these.
My son is yelling at my husband there. I apologize.
Sorry about that.
He forgets that I'm painting here with y'all
I didn't know
because
you were
he's
still
not
painting.
he's not a painter.
I thought you were done.
So,
Bees make honey.
hey child, since you're here, can you get me some more coffee, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Seems like that's all I'm good for.
You're not just good for making coffee. That's not all you're good for. I need some more sweetener in there now, please.
Yeah.
Now we're gonna need a spoon. Oh, I think he's broken. He used to wake up in the mornings and make us coffee all the time. Now he plays video games.
Building
All
a
the
castle.
time.
all the time.
But I'm building a castle. That's fun.
Yes, he's on Minecraft building a large castle, and he's made mistakes numerous times and had to repaint over it numerous times. Not paint, rebuild.
Pretty much.
Rebuild so many times. My husband's now watching over my shoulder because he likes when I paint, and
Hi, everybody.
he's always curious.
She's making a butterfly rock.
Alright, Ian, thank you.
She's making an adult caterpillar.
An evolved caterpillar.
Alright, these guys over here are white, but I'm going to do the orangey segment here of his body. Kind of mix up a little bit of an orange. I'm just painting it in the direction that his body would be segmented. Now it comes all the way up into there. Now I'm just kind of filling it in because I'm being lazy. Alright, so in order to make them look a little bit more three-dimensional, I'm going to go in between the segments a little bit and add just some red on one side. It'll kind of look like it's round. I'll rinse out my brush, grab a little bit of the yellow, and do the highlight there. I'm going to do a highlight on the segments. Just kind of above the black lines. Alright, now we got the white sections left. I'm going to have to get out some new white paint because that is pretty dried up over there. So just like before, I'm going to kind of tip it into my lid a little bit and just use that so I don't have to pour a bunch of white out. And then I'm going to work on these segments here. And no, I don't have to do this on this part here. I wouldn't have to repaint over this because I already had the white paint there, but I like making sure my lines are nice and precise. Dot here. It's a little bit of a bigger dot. Maybe I should get my paintbrush. A little twirl there. Same on this side. There's a nice little segment here, a little bit bigger segment, and then these guys I have to fix because I kind of made them kind of crazy. Whenever I do these really tiny detail areas, I tend to hold my breath. There's a little dot over here. We're going to give him a little dot there. We've got a couple more segments like here. Now on the outside, he's got like these dots and then space and then a couple dots and then some space, and then as the wing gets a little bit longer, they kind of become a little bit longer segments and then a space. On the very outside edge of him. like I said, these guys kind of, I think, have a different pattern every time. They're different butterflies, so have a little fun with it. You don't have to worry about getting it too exact. And come over here to this side. Last few dots over here on this side, and we'll work on his body again. Now, if I wanted to be really picky, I suppose I could have counted these segments and to see the same on both sides, but, you know, I'm not that picky, so I'm not going to worry about it. These dots are a little bit bigger. Again, I could be using the back of my paintbrush if I wanted to make the dots more circular. Alright, now we see a couple dots on the back of his head. And a couple more up here. Twist out the paint from my paintbrush so I can bring it to a nice tip. Get a little bit of a line through here. Just got a line going down his back. Add a little bit of a highlight down here every once in a while with the white. And then we're going to call him finished. Remember, I'm going to come back through with my marker if I can find it. And do his antennae. I had a bunch of markers laying around. Do you think I can find one when I need it? Of course not. Aha! Alright. So his antennae come off. And a little bit of a bulb at the end. If I wanted to come through, like I said, with my Sharpie marker, I can kind of correct any little black areas I may have missed. If I want this segment here to be a little bit brighter or wider, I can go back through with my Sharpie marker. A little bit more control. than I did. Now, the problem with doing it with a Sharpie and your paint is you might get your Sharpie kind of clogged. You have to get a piece of paper and draw. Kind of get that paint out of there. If I have a larger area I want to fix, I'll just go back to my paint and a detail brush. Got water out of there. Like so. Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it's a little bit longer than some of my others, but we did 2 different projects here. Both butterflies, just one full butterfly, more detail on the rock here, and the other one just the canvas. So there we have it. Like I said, I'll go ahead and sign. Sign my art pieces, and there we go. Let's see how many birds like this guy. Once again, Rust-Oleum, Painter's Touch, Ultra Cover, Clear Gloss, protects, you know, bonds to all of that stuff. I'll spray a couple coats over this guy in another day or 2, maybe later today. I'm impatient, so I'll probably paint him later. If you spray paint before it's really dry, it tends to bubble up, so that's not a good thing. So, all right, enjoy, guys. We'll see you next week for our coffee painting.